The sky was a bruised purple, and the first cold breath of the storm whispered through the pines. Lena stood on her creaking porch, a silhouette against the threatening gloom, watching the man on her roof. Eli Thorne moved with a weary efficiency that spoke of a lifetime of doing things he'd rather not. Each swing of his hammer, each placement of a fresh asphalt shingle, was practiced and precise, a stark contrast to the frantic energy of the gathering clouds. From her vantage point, she could see the tense set of his broad shoulders, the way his worn flannel shirt clung to his back with a patch of sweat. He was a fortress of a man, but one that seemed on the verge of surrender. "The last bracket is secure, Ms. O'Leary," he called down, his voice a low rumble that rivaled the distant thunder. He began his careful descent down the ladder, his tools clinking in the leather belt at his waist. "You should be watertight for this one. But I'd have a look at the whole structure come spring. It's seen better days." "Thank you, Eli. I don't know what I would have done," Lena said, her voice softer than she intended. She held out a glass of iced tea, condensation beating on the glass. He hesitated, wiping his hands on his jeans, before taking it. His fingers, calloused and stained with tar, brushed against hers. A simple, accidental touch, but it sent a current through her so sharp it felt like pain. "Just glad I could help," he muttered, his eyes, the color of a stormy sea, flickering towards the dirt driveway where a beat-up truck sat, a child's faded dinosaur stuffy visible in the backseat. "My boy, Charlie, he'd never let me hear the end of it if your place flooded. He's fond of you." "The feeling is mutual," Lena smiled, a genuine, warm thing that transformed her usually guarded face. "He's a wonderful kid." Eli's gaze lingered on her for a moment too long, and she saw the flicker of something in his eyes, not just the exhaustion of a single father working two jobs, but a deep, resonant loneliness that called out to her own. He was 10 years her senior, his face etched with lines that hadn't been carved by laughter. He looked like a man who had loved deeply and lost catastrophically. "I should get going," he said, draining the glass. "Beat the rain back to town. Charlie's with Mrs. Higgins, and she gets nervous when the weather turns." "Of course." Lena watched as he packed his tools into the truck. The wind picked up, whipping her simple cotton dress around her legs. She felt a reckless, terrifying impulse. "Eli." He turned, one hand on the truck's door. "Would you and Charlie, would you like to come for dinner tomorrow? To thank you properly?" The question hung in the charged air between them. Eli studied her, the woman in the modest, slightly crumbling cottage at the edge of his world. She was beautiful in an unassuming way, with eyes that held too much wisdom for someone he guessed was in her late 20s. She lived simply, wore secondhand clothes, and had a quietness about her that he found both calming and intriguing. He saw a kindred spirit, another soul just trying to keep the wind and rain at bay. A slow, hesitant smile broke across his face, the first genuine one she'd seen from him. It lit up his weary features, making him look years younger. "Yeah," he said, the word a soft exhale. "Yeah, Charlie would like that. I'd like that." The storm broke an hour after he left. Lena stood at her window, watching the rain lash against the panes, but the roof, Eli's roof, held firm. A strange, unfamiliar feeling of safety settled over her. For the first time in a long time, it wasn't just a house. It felt like a home waiting to be lived in. The dinner was a quiet, slightly awkward, but profoundly beautiful affair. Charlie, a bright-eyed 7-year-old with his father's solemnity, chattered about school and his dinosaurs, filling the silences. Eli watched Lena with his son, saw the easy way she listened, the way she made the boy feel like the most important person in the world. His heart, a closed fist for so long, began to unclench. After Charlie fell asleep on the worn sofa, wrapped in a quilt, Eli helped Lena with the dishes. "He doesn't warm up to people like that," Eli said softly, nodding towards his sleeping son. "Not since his mom passed." Lena's hands stilled in the soapy water. "I'm so sorry, Eli. It was a long time ago," he said, though the pain in his voice was fresh. "Some days it feels like yesterday. Trying to be both mom and dad, trying to keep the bills paid, it's a lot." He looked around the small, cozy kitchen. "But this is nice. Peaceful." He was standing close. She could feel the heat from his body. The air was thick with unspoken words. "It doesn't have to be a one-time thank you," Lena whispered, her courage surprising her. You could both have this. Whenever you want." Eli turned to her, his expression raw and vulnerable. He reached out, his hand cupping her cheek, his thumb stroking her skin with a reverence that stole her breath. Lena. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. He leaned in, and his lips met hers. It was not a kiss of fiery passion, but one of profound recognition. It was the kiss of two lost travelers finding the same, desolate shore. It tasted of hope, of a future he had stopped daring to imagine. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. Stay, she breathed. The roads are still bad. Stay with Charlie. He nodded, his eyes shimmering. That night, Eli Thorne slept more soundly than he had in years, the woman who had mended a piece of his soul curled against his chest, while the storm that could not touch them raged harmlessly outside. The change was gradual, like the coming of dawn. He started leaving a spare work shirt in her closet. A toothbrush appeared in her bathroom. Charlie's drawings were taped to her refrigerator. For 3 weeks, Eli lived in a bubble of a happiness so potent it felt like a dream. He fixed her squeaky porch step, built a new shelf for her books, and in return, she filled his life with quiet laughter and a sense of belonging. It was on a Tuesday, after a long day of back-breaking work at the mill, that he drove to her cottage, a bouquet of wildflowers picked from the roadside in his hand. He was going to ask her something. Something big. Something about merging their two broken halves into a whole. He pulled up to her cottage, but her simple sedan wasn't there. Instead, a car he didn't recognize was idling in the driveway, a sleek, black luxury vehicle that cost more than he would make in 5 years. A man in a tailored suit and driver's cap stood beside it, holding an umbrella against a light drizzle. Confused, Eli got out of his truck. "Can I help you?" he asked, his protective instincts flaring. "Is Lena all right?" The driver gave him a polite, impersonal smile. "Ms. O'Leary is perfectly fine, sir. I'm just awaiting her return from the site inspection at the new Innovation Park." Eli blinked. Innovation Park? There must be a mistake. Lena O'Leary lives here. He gestured to the cottage, a place he had personally patched and repaired. The driver's smile didn't falter, but it became a touch condescending. "No mistake, sir. Ms. O'Leary prefers the privacy of the cottage when she's not overseeing her holdings." The word, holdings, landed like a physical blow. Before Eli could form a question, the familiar sound of Lena's sedan approached. But it wasn't her old car. It was the same model of luxury vehicle, gliding to a silent stop behind the first. The driver hurried to open the passenger door. And Lena stepped out. But it wasn't his Lena. This woman wore a sharp, cream-colored pantsuit that screamed of money and power. Her hair, usually tied in a simple knot, was styled in an elegant cascade. She was speaking into a sleek smartphone, her voice crisp and authoritative. "Just finalize the acquisition with the state board. Tell them the O'Leary Group's offer is final." She ended the call and looked up, her eyes landing on Eli. For a fraction of a second, he saw the woman he knew, the one who laughed with his son and kissed him in a rain-soaked kitchen. Then, her expression shifted into one of polite, professional surprise, a mask sliding perfectly into place. "Eli," she said, her voice cool and measured. "This is a surprise." He stood frozen, the wildflowers dangling limply from his hand. The world tilted on its axis. The modest cottage, the simple dresses, the stories of barely making ends waitressing at the diner in the next town over, it was all a lie. A carefully constructed fiction. "Lena," he managed, his voice a broken thing. What is this?" "The O'Leary Group." Her driver handed her a leather-bound portfolio. She took it, her posture straight and unyielding. She looked at him, and for the first time, he saw not kindness in her eyes, but a cool, assessing distance. She was looking at the man who fixed her roof, a man she had paid for a service with a currency far more valuable than money. She took a slow breath, the weight of the truth pressing down on the space between them. "Eli," she said, her voice devoid of the warmth he had come to crave. "My full name is Elena O'Leary. And I suppose the charade is over. I own the mill you work at. I own the land it's built on. To be perfectly blunt," she paused, her gaze sweeping over him, from his worn boots to his stunned face, "I own half the state." The wildflowers fell from his numb fingers, their vibrant colors a cruel joke against the gray gravel. The fortress he had so carefully started to rebuild around his heart didn't just crack, it vaporized into dust, leaving him exposed and utterly, devastatingly, alone. The drive home was a blur of rain-smeared asphalt and the deafening roar of his own humiliation. Eli's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his mind replaying the scene on a tortuous loop. Elena O'Leary. The name was a legend in the state, a phantom of immense wealth and influence whispered about in news articles about corporate takeovers and philanthropic donations. He'd pictured a stern, elderly woman in a skyscraper office, not the soft-spoken woman with gentle hands who had held his son. She owned the mill. The thought was a physical sickness. Every splinter, every aching muscle, every ounce of sweat he'd shed to provide for Charlie, it had all flowed into her bottomless coffers. And she had watched him. She had listened to him talk about his fears of not making the mortgage, his pride in a small bonus, his desperation to keep his job. She had kissed him with the knowledge that she held his entire livelihood in the palm of her hand. He pulled into his own dilapidated driveway, the sight of his cramped, rented house a stark reminder of the chasm between their worlds. Charlie was at a friend's house. The silence in the small home was oppressive. He sank onto the sofa, the same one Charlie had slept on at her cottage, and dropped his head into his hands. The memory of her touch now felt like a brand, a mark of his own foolishness. He had been a project. A diversion for a bored billionaire. A charity case she could sleep with. The next day, he didn't go to work. He called in sick for the first time in years. He ignored the dozen calls from an unknown number he knew was her. He spent the day mechanically doing laundry, fixing a leaky faucet, anything to keep his hands and mind busy. But the pain was a live wire, sparking and sizzling beneath his skin. It was Charlie who finally broke through the fog. He came home from school, his small face pinched with concern. "Dad, are you okay? Mrs. Higgins said you were sick." Eli looked at his son, at the innocent trust in his eyes, and felt his heart shatter all over again. How could he explain that the woman Charlie had started to love, the woman he had tentatively started drawing pictures of their family with, was a lie? "I'm okay, buddy. Just tired. Is Lena coming over tonight? You said we were gonna have a movie night." The name was a knife to his gut. "No, Charlie. She's not." The boy's face fell, and the disappointment there was a heavier burden than any Eli had ever carried. 3 days passed. The text started. First, simple. "Eli, please, let me explain." Then, more desperate. "It wasn't a lie. Not all of it. What we had was real." He read them all, his jaw clenched so tight it ached, but he never replied. How could he? Every word from her was now suspect. On the 4th day, he came home from a different job site to find her waiting on his porch. She was back in her simple jeans and a sweater, but the illusion was broken. He could now see the expensive cut of the denim, the soft, cashmere blend of the knit. She looked pale and tired, her eyes shadowed. Eli stopped at the bottom of the steps, his body a wall of tension. "Get off my porch, Ms. O'Leary." "Eli, please," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "Just let me talk to you for 5 minutes." "Why? So you can concoct another story? Did you come to check on your investment?" He spat, the venom in his voice startling them both. "The simpleton roofer you let play house for a few weeks. Did you get your kicks, slumming it out here with us?" She flinched as if he'd struck her. "It wasn't like that. The cottage, it's the only place that's ever been mine. My real self. Not the CEO, not the heir, just Lena. My father built it for my mother before the money, before all of this." She gestured vaguely, encompassing the vastness of her empire. "I go there to remember who I am. Or who I was supposed to be." "And what was I?" he demanded, his voice cracking. "A part of the rustic fantasy. The strapping handyman to complete the picture before you went back to your real life. You were the first real thing I'd found in a decade." She cried, tears finally spilling over. "The first person who looked at me and didn't see a stock portfolio or a last name. You saw me. And I saw you. A good, honest, struggling man who loved his son more than anything. I fell in love with you, Eli. That was real." For a moment, her words, raw and desperate, almost found a crack in his armor. He remembered the softness in her eyes, the way she traced the lines on his face as if memorizing him. But then the memory of her driver's condescending smile, the sleek black car, the phrase, "half the state," echoed in his mind, drowning out the whispers of doubt. "You don't know what love is," he said, his voice flat and cold, final. "You only know what ownership is. You owned my workplace, you owned the roof over my head that I fixed for you, and you thought you could own a piece of my life for your amusement. Well, the game's over." He walked up the steps, brushing past her to unlock his door. He could smell her perfume, the same delicate scent that had haunted his dreams for weeks. Now it smelled of betrayal. "Eli," she whispered, her hand reaching out to gently touch his arm. He froze, then pulled his arm away as if burned. He turned to face her one last time, his expression a mask of granite. "Stay away from me." Stay away from my son. We are not your toys. He saw the hope in her eyes extinguish, replaced by a devastation so complete it was almost satisfying. He stepped inside and closed the door, leaning against it, listening to the sound of her quiet sobs on the other side before they finally faded away, followed by the sound of a luxury car driving off for the last time. Dash dash dash. Weeks turned into a month. The sharp edge of the pain dulled into a constant, heavy ache. He threw himself into work, into being a father. Life returned to a grim, predictable rhythm. He thought that was the end of it. The unforgettable twist had been her identity. The heartbreak had been the lie. He was wrong. A formal, cream-colored envelope arrived in the mail, mixed in with the bills. It was addressed to him in an elegant, familiar script. His first instinct was to burn it. But a deeper, masochistic curiosity won out. Inside was a single sheet of high-quality stationery. Eli, I will honor your request and never contact you again. But before I go, you deserve one final truth, one I was too much of a coward to give you myself. The day we met, when you came to fix my roof, it wasn't an accident. I knew who you were. I had known for months. Your wife, Sarah, didn't die in a random car accident. The faulty brake line in her car was a known defect, one my company's automotive division had discovered in internal audits. We buried the report. It was cheaper to settle the handful of lawsuits that made it through than to issue a full recall. I sought you out because of my guilt. I wanted to help you, anonymously. But then I met you. I met Charlie. And I fell in love. My lie became a prison of my own making. Every kind word from you, every touch, was a punishment I felt I deserved. The company is now being forced to issue the recall. The truth will come out, with or without me. You'll probably read about it soon. I am so sorry. For everything. Not a day will go by that I won't remember the man who fixed my roof, and the life I destroyed twice over. Elena. The letter fluttered from Eli's numb fingers. The world didn't just tilt, it shattered. He stumbled back, collapsing into a kitchen chair. The breath ripped from his lungs. The image of Sarah's smiling face, Charlie's face the day of the funeral, the memory of Elena, crying on his porch, all swirled together in a vortex of unimaginable horror. She hadn't just been a rich woman slumming it. She hadn't just been a liar. She was the reason his wife was dead. The woman he had let kiss his son goodnight, the woman he had dreamed of a future with, was directly responsible for the core tragedy of his life. The roof he had fixed for her, the home he had made safe, was a grotesque monument to her guilt. His love for her, the most real thing he'd felt since Sarah's death, had been born from the ashes of the life she had destroyed. He stared out the window at the gray, indifferent sky, the truth settling into his bones, cold and permanent as a tombstone. The heartbreaking romance was not a story of two star-crossed lovers from different worlds. It was a horror story. And the final, unforgettable twist was that the love of his life was the architect of his grief, and his heart, now understanding the full, devastating picture, had to find a way to keep beating, forever broken in a way he could never, ever fix.